Well, good morning once again. Turn to someone and tell them, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Oh, on the day that I need a little water, there is none. Would you want to get me? Here's a cup right here. Only because there's a little frog that's trying to jump into my throat. Well, this much anticipated day is almost upon us because tomorrow we're going to celebrate the birth of the Christ manifested in the infant. Thank you so much. Jesus. We're celebrating the birth of the Christ manifested in the infant Jesus. Tomorrow also marks the manifestation of the Christ ideal, right? The ideal that is manifesting in the consciousness of the masses. Hence we have Christ Mass, Christmas, or that Mass is more at. So the more at what? More at Christ. We're celebrating the awakening of Christ's consciousness into the earth, into manifestation, into expression. And this manifestation of the Christ ideal, the Christ principles, into the heart and the soul and the body of Jesus is no small thing because it sets up an example for us. It shows us the way, right? Jesus as the Christ is also called what? The way shower. And so it's no small thing that this expression of the birth of this energy, of this consciousness into the race consciousness is no small thing. Because what it does is it sets us up as well. It opens us up, all of us. It opens us up to the divine potential that exists within each of us. And it brings about or brings to our awareness that God is not only with us, Emmanuel, right? His name shall be called Emmanuel. God is with us, God with us. But it's even more so than God being with us. This is the time that we celebrate that God is also within us. It's a good thing to have God with you, but an even better thing to have God within you. A big difference. And so we are aware, we have become aware that this energy of the divine, the Christos, the Logos, which means the word Logos means the Word. And it says that the Word became what? Flesh and dwelt among us. That this Word is the creative, this energy, this Christos is the creative energy of God being made manifest and dwelling within us. And the creative word, the creative energy of God is not just any old word. It's the divine. Christ is that divine Logos. So that means within this Christ ideal is the Logos, meaning it is the summation of the creative energy of God. The very power of God to speak a thing into being, right? Thou shalt call a thing into being, and it shall be so. And God said. So this whole thing of the Christ coming into expression, this Word becoming flesh and dwelling within us, is no small thing. Because we have an awareness now that humanity has the presence and power of not only Emmanuel, God with us, but God within us. That's a beautiful thing. And we have access to it all. And that's good news. And it is the same good news that the angels heralded over 2,000 years ago. When in Luke, and we've affirmed some of it this morning, when in Luke chapter 2, verses 8 through 14, this is the angels and the shepherds. And in that region there were shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were filled with fear. And the angel said, "Be not afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of a great joy which will come to all people." And I love that. That's a hint. I bring you good news of a great joy which will be and come to all people. Meaning, joy is going to be one of the gifts that we receive that is coming. Not only just joy, but what kind of great joy that's coming to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel, a multitude of heavenly hosts praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace amongst men." Goodwill, peace, and joy. Joy to the world. That's a powerful thing that we have been given. A great joy which will come to all people. Meaning that this is one of the gifts that is available to everyone who is aware of, abides in, that Christ Spirit that indwells them. This is great news. This is great joy. Joy, joy, joy. One of our precious gifts. Now, we've been working these last 3 weeks prior to today with the themes of Advent, and recognizing that Advent is really proclaiming the arrival of the Christ, and along with the Christ comes these wonderful gifts. And we started off with what? We had the gift of hope, then we had the gift of peace, then we had the gift of love, and today we have the gift of joy. And we are uncovering these gifts as we embrace the presence and power of God that indwells us as the Christ, as that perfect pattern. Christ is that perfect pattern, the perfect example of our very divinity. And so we were given a way shower. Here's the way. This is the good news. Because you have been endowed with this very Spirit of a living God in you, Christ. So, I think it's fitting that joy would be the last quality that would be the expression as a result of the birth of Jesus as what? The Christ. That joy is this final expression. Because when you think about it, there's a tie between hope and peace and love. When we talked about hope, that positive expectation of good, when you have a peace that passes, nothing to do with out here, a peace that passes all understanding, a peace that's deeply rooted in the presence and power of God, knowing that all things are working together for your highest good, that everything, despite appearances, is still well and in divine order. Right? Peace is that order, that same peace that keeps everything in order resides with you. And when you have a love that's so pure and so deep that there's nothing that could ever separate you from that, well, you can't help but have joy. If you really understand the gifts, you cannot help but have joy. So I wanted to look a little bit today into this concept of joy and peace and happiness and all of this stuff. And I started with each week I gave you a little handout about what Charles Fillmore, the co-author of Unity, would write about each of the subjects of hope and peace and love. And when I looked up what he said in the Revealing Word about joy, it was rather short, so I didn't print it out for you, but I will read it. And this is what he says joy is. He said, joy is the happiness of God expressed through his perfect idea, man. See, Christ is the perfect idea held in the mind of God for us, about us. It's your spiritual nature. So, joy is the happiness of God expressed through his perfect idea, man. Joy and gladness are strength-giving, especially if the mind is fixed on the things of spirit. Then he says, affirm, the joy of the Lord is my strength. So joy and gladness have this life-giving quality, this strengthening quality, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But I thought I wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of happiness, because usually people think that when they are happy, they'll be filled with joy. And I brought one of my resources that I use quite often. It's called Wisdom for the Soul, and it has just some quotes on various topics. And so this morning, I looked at some for happiness, because they didn't have joy in here. They didn't have gladness in here. They didn't have rejoicing in here. The closest I could get to was happiness. And since Mr. Fillmore said that joy was the happiness of God, right, coming through the expression of the ideal man, woman. So I thought, well, let's look what some of these quotes say. So Buddha says there's no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. I love that one. Then it says, one quote says, happiness is the absence of striving for happiness. Right? Because if you're striving, you're struggling, right? Oh, there's my happiness. Oh, let me go over there. There's my happiness and this one and that one. When you're not striving, all right, you can be happy. Says the search, this is a Zen saying, the search for happiness is one of the chief sources of unhappiness. I like that one too. A pleasant and happy life does not come from external things. Man draws from within himself as a spring, pleasure and joy. This one says, we cannot find contentment in ourselves. It is useless to seek it. Where we cannot find contentment in ourselves, is useless to seek it elsewhere. Okay, you can chase after things and contentment, but you'll never find it if you're looking out here. Happiness belongs to those who are sufficient unto themselves. For all external sources of happiness and pleasure are, by their very nature, highly uncertain, precarious, ephemeral, and subject to change. Haven't you experienced that thing that you thought was going to bring you supreme happiness? When you got it, after a while, it's like a kid with a toy. They play with it for 5 minutes, then that happiness is gone, right? The supreme happiness of life is the conviction that one is loved for oneself, or better yet, loved despite oneself. That's good. Happiness is manna. Manna, that's the stuff from heaven that feeds us, right? Happiness is manna. It is to be gathered in grains and enjoyed every day. See, the thing about manna from heaven was when the Israelites tried to store it up, right? It spoiled. The manna was only given for the day. See, and sometimes we try to store up a whole bunch of happiness, thinking that I got enough so that tomorrow and you might not even be here tomorrow, right? So he says, happiness is manna, which is to be gathered in grains and enjoyed every day. It will not keep. It cannot be accumulated, nor have we got to go out of ourselves or into remote places to gather it, since it has rained down from heaven at our very door. I love that. That what you need will rain down from heaven at the very door of your being. Joy is not in things, it is in us. The time to be happy is now. The place to be happy is here. The way to be happy is to make others so. It's not easy to find happiness in ourselves, and it is not possible to find it elsewhere. The secret of happiness is not doing what one likes, but liking what one does. Happiness begins with you, wherever you are, in whatever conditions or country or circumstances. Your happiness lies within you, not without. It is a state of mind. If only we'd stop trying to be happy, we could have a pretty good time. Happiness will never be any greater than the idea we have of it. Check what ideas you have that you think are going to make you happy. There's no such thing as finding true happiness by searching for it directly. It must come, if it come at all, indirectly, or by the service, the love, and the happiness we give to others. When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often, we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one which has opened for us. That was Helen Keller. True happiness is in the love stream that springs from one's soul. And he who will allow this stream to run continually in all conditions of life, in all situations, however difficult, will have a happiness which truly belongs to him, whose source is not without, but within. Happiness often sneaks through a door you didn't know you left open. There's no end of craving, hence contentment alone is the best way to happiness. Therefore, acquire contentment. Happiness consists of not in having, but in being, not of possessing, but in enjoying. It is the warm glow of the heart at peace with itself. One of the surest ways to find happiness for yourself is to devote your energies toward making someone else happy. Happiness is an elusive, transitory thing, and if you set out and search for it, you will find it evasive. But if you try to bring happiness to someone else, then it comes to you. Men can only be happy when they do not assume that the object of life is happiness. Uh-oh. Happiness is not a station to arrive at, but a manner of traveling. It is the very pursuit of happiness that thwarts happiness. Happiness is within us and it is ours, but we are always superimposing our own inner joy onto something outside and thinking it comes from there. And last, as long as we structure our lives in a way where our happiness is dependent upon something we cannot control, then we will experience pain. So I was just inspired when I was reading some of these thoughts on happiness, but I was also very plagued about Mr. Fillmore's definition of joy, when he said that joy is the happiness of God expressed through his perfect idea man. So before I thought, well, let me think about this a little bit. Joy is the happiness of God. And when I think about that, first of all, now for a spiritual, this is wonderful, but I want to give a spiritual and a metaphysical understanding of where we are and where we want to be in consciousness. Because first of all, we in New Thought and in Unity and in our higher understanding, we say that God is being. The beingness of all that is, right? God is the beingness of all that is. Not a being, but beingness itself. And so to define joy as the happiness of God could make it sound like God is a human. A human who can be what? Happy. And if God is happy, that means that God could also be unhappy. If God is loving, then God could also be unloving. If God is full of peace, it means God could also be full of wrath and anger and judgment and capriciousness and indecisiveness. Choosing, picking. Now that doesn't sound like the God that I know. That's an Old Testament concept, right? A very capricious God. God made in the image and after the likeness of man, as opposed to us being made in the image and after the likeness of God. And so to think that God can be, or joy is the happiness of God, I'm thinking, well, it's not quite how I would put that. Because God is not a human with a plethora of human emotions. God doesn't have the emotion of love. God is love. God does not have the emotion of peace. God is peace. See, so what we have to understand is to make it clear that we're not talking about this being that has happiness or has sadness or has anger or upset. What God has are qualities of being. And joy is a quality of being. We might experience happiness, but what happens is, there are plenty of people who, and myself included, who might experience and feel happy today, and that happiness is gone tomorrow, right? Because we're flip-flop. I feel joyful today and sad tomorrow. And when that happens, that is because we are allowing our inner state to be determined by our outer conditions and circumstances. And your conditions and your circumstances are subject to what? Change. And so if you blow with every which way the wind blows, I'm happy because I had this. Oh, I'm sad that I don't have it. Oh, yes, I'm happy, which is what we do. We're in and out and up and down. We run hot, we run cold, right? We're happy, we're sad. All of these things, depending upon the conditions or the circumstances of our lives or in our lives. And that just keeps us fluctuating, never grounded. That is not how the divine energy of spirit works in us. And that's not how God, but that is making God into the image of man. So this whole concept of joy being the happiness of God. No, joy is a quality of being within the presence and power of God. And it is not subject to circumstances or conditions or how much money you get or how many gifts you're going to get. It has nothing to do with that. It is a state of being, a state of mind. And when we can, just like peace and love and joy, understanding, when we can master a state of being as opposed to thinking, a being, but when we can master a state of being, whichever that state is, when you can master of that state of being, it isn't then determined by outer conditions, but it is, to master it is determined by one's understanding of your inner connection to the divine. When you get this connection of love as a quality of being, not a thing that gets directed towards me because I'm good or I've been not so naughty. See, that whole thing of Santa Claus, are you naughty or nice? Some of us think that that's the question God is constantly asking us, and therefore giving us according to whether we've been naughty or nice. God is love, divine love, and it cannot help but love. And it's nothing to do with your actions, your behavior. You can't impress God that much. We can't do that. What we want to do is access this divine love, the infinite love of God. We want to access peace. We want to access hope and joy and all of the qualities of being. That is our task. And so we want to recognize that this whole range of, when you've mastered a state of being, you're not subject to the emotional fluctuation of your emotions, high or low or whatever. And don't get me wrong, because when we've mastered a state of being in love or being in peace or being, at love or at peace or at joy or at hope, when you've mastered that, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to feel the range of emotions that are usually attributed to our human nature. Yes, we have a range of emotions, but one of the things that we are trying to do is to transcend our human emotions to our what? Spiritual nature. We're trying to transcend our human nature into our spiritual nature. And it doesn't mean that when you've done that, that all of a sudden you don't have emotions. But I will tell you this, you will be different. When you are coming from your spiritual nature, your expressions are totally, totally different. So you might then move from the expression of a lower vibration into a higher one, a higher vibration that's based on truth or based on a spiritual quality of being, like compassion. So instead of me feeling overwhelmed by sadness and grief, I might then be moved to the higher expression of compassion or understanding. So it's not that when we become spiritually enlightened that we don't have any feelings for what is taking place. It means that our feelings are at a different nature and a different level. We don't get tossed by the winds of time and circumstance and situations. So what I might be, something that I might be angry about when I've mastered a state of being of love, I might have more compassion. I might have more understanding. So my anger might be righteous indignation, which is totally different than just plain old angry, right? Get out of my face, none of that. So our vibrations is different. Our emotional expression is totally different. Instead, we might be filled with more compassion. We will be moved into a deeper and a higher feelings, maybe feelings of love, maybe feelings of understanding, maybe feelings of compassion or forgiveness. This is how Jesus could be on the cross and say, you know what, forgive them. I'd be like, you know what, when I come, I'm going to get you. That's the human, right? The human on the cross would be saying, you're going to get yours. I see you. Because we're seeking. That's what we would do. But when you're in a different vibration, it's like, I'm going to still do what I need to do, but from a higher expression. When you've mastered a state of being that is not conditional to circumstance or situation, your vibratory energy is different. Your thought process is different. You don't think like you used to think. You know, it's the different vibration. Your emotional expression will be higher, so much so that you'll be lifted up and you'll be strengthened and able to meet whatever situation and circumstance that life throws at you. But you will meet it from a completely different vibration and level. Not from a lower consciousness, but from a what? Higher one. Not from your human nature, but from your spiritual nature. And make no mistake, you can always tell when you're coming from your human nature and when you're coming from your spiritual nature. Because the energy and the vibration will be completely different. And so it signals us. I want to be compassionate, loving, forgiving. And I know when I'm not operating on that vibration. I want to operate on the truth. So when you master a state of being, like joy, like love, whatever the state of being, the qualities of God as being, when you master that, your emotions and expressions are completely different. And you find yourself filled with strength. This is why Mr. Fillmore said that joy and gladness are strength-giving, especially if the mind is fixed on the things of spirit. And we need strength in these days ahead. We need to be strengthened, so we can't continually get upset about, every day I do look and see what has been done. I might have my moment, but I know I must come back to a basis of truth so that I can be strengthened to handle whatever is lying before me. So I love it. He says joy and gladness are strength-giving, especially if the mind is fixed on the things of spirit. So the key here is to what? Fix your mind on the things of spirit. See, this is what came up today. When your mind is fixed on spirit, your mind gets fixed by spirit, right? When your mind is fixed on spiritual things, that which disturbed you, annoyed you, frightened you, limited you, whatever, gets fixed by spirit. The scripture tells us, delight in God. It says this in Psalms, the joy of the Lord shall be your strength. Not physical strength, but the strength of mind, the strength of heart, the strength of spirit, to keep on keeping on. That's what strength means. It also says this, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. And then it says in Psalms 126, they that sow in tears shall reap in joy. See, when we truly understand the power of this Christ ideal that is being birthed in us, that it was given to us as an awareness, and we truly understand this power, this presence, this divine essence that is within us, and we begin to rely upon it, to seek it, to speak from it, pray upon it, meditate, delight in it, all of that, then joy begins to flood the soul. Joy begins to flood your consciousness. And it's not this happiness based on things, but true divine joy. The book of John says this, that the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. Meaning that grace and love, forgiveness and understanding, elevation of consciousness, and the truth which can free us from any binding, limiting thing, all of these things, our awareness, our understanding of God, all of these things were given to us with the simple birth and manifestation of the Christ ideal. See, this is why the angels rejoiced. This is why the heavenly hosts had to just break out, because they knew the gift that was being given to us. They knew that. And this is why Jesus could even say at his end journey, he could even say, look, these things I have spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. There's a fullness. See? These are the things, if you can abide by what I've shared, what I've lived, what I've taught, then my joy will remain in you. See, joy has a remaining quality, a sustaining quality. It doesn't fluctuate here or there. If we remember that Christ ideal, then that joy remains in us, and the joy will be full. There's a fullness of joy. So we have to learn to count it all joy, to rejoice in joy, to delight in gladness, to delight in the things of spirit, to fix our minds on the things of spirit, on truth. All of these things will bring life-sustaining energy, strength-giving energy, vitality to keep on keeping on. We'll be unshakable, unmovable, unflappable, and able to just be present because we have a state of being through it all. That's a powerful thing. That's a powerful thing. So, this is the day that the Lord has made, and we're going to continue to rejoice in it. We're not manufacturing joy. You can't manufacture joy. You can't fake it till you make it. Joy is an abiding quality that will come from within you when you touch the things of spirit. When you remember the Christ in you is your hope of glory, that Christ ideal, and you give it room to express. You make those higher choices. You see a higher vibration. You seek something higher. You recognize when you're in a lower vibration. And when you do that, you begin to bring forth Christ, give birth to this Christ. And then thou shalt have joy and gladness in your heart and in your soul. So tomorrow, we ask that you let the Christ be born in you before you go about doing anything. Give thanks for the Christ that is born in you, and then watch and see if the heavenly hosts will not begin to rejoice and be exceedingly glad for you. The divine is simply waiting for your presence to take and receive the present, that Spirit of God. So, we have the fullness of joy, we have hope, we have peace, we have love, and that is enough for all of us to be able to transform this world. So step into the power of Christ, the power of Christ consciousness, because it is time. Blessings, namaste, Merry Christmas, and Merry Christmas to all of us. Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. Yes.